piece of legislation. It appears that the international community is becoming more unified in its approach, even over the last 2 months, to North Korea. This is critical. Obviously, the South Korean government and Japan, working together as they have, has been incredibly important in getting the rest of the world to watch and see what a danger this is in the Far East. And that relationship, both governments should be congratulated for working on what is, through some very difficult time in history, but something that's essentially of essential importance to get other countries in the world to look at this as a great danger it is in the Far East. And so that both governments are to be really congratulated for doing that, because it is not an easy thing to do. It's important that we in the United States, as we look at this, not reduce our relationship with South Korea to simply a defensive relationship. It is more than this. It is a cultural relationship. It is a trade relationship. It is an economic relationship that has to grow. And we need, in the United States, to not forget that our relationships with key allies throughout the world go beyond simply defense matters and protecting each other when they're in need and in danger. The U.S. and South Korea have really a range of common interests, including liberalizing trade in the region and through the full implementation of the U.S. ROK free trade agreement. So these are things that we have to work on right now and continue to build on. If the United States does not continue to build these across the board, not just the defense area, but the trade area, the cultural area, we will not be able to take the type of lead and to be able to deepen the relationship, not only in South Korea, but across the Pacific, that we need. So let me conclude by saying, as we watch this, we have seen a United States that actually, if you look in the last 30 or 40 years, has changed. We went from containment of the Soviet Union as being the policy of the United States from World War II on into the early 80s. And it really changed fundamentally with Ronald Reagan as President of the United States. He decided containment ought no longer be the policy. And he believed, and in many cases, was the cognoscenti used to sort of snicker when President Reagan would say, we want to get rid of communism. Oh, how can you do this? Well, he meant it. And he had some allies in this. Pope John Paul II, Margaret Thatcher, and he led. He was willing to lead in a conscious, careful, not adventuristic, careful way. And in fact, his actions, the actions of the Pope, and the support he got from Margaret Thatcher and other world leaders, led to the demise of communism in the Soviet Union. Other things have arisen since. But if you look, that change in policy was followed up by Iraq invading Kuwait. And we had a reaction to that policy by President George H.W. Bush, that the United States went in and cleared Iraq out of there and then left. At that point, you then had another reaction, and that reaction was the peace dividend. Now, the peace dividend was due, in great extent, to the fall of the Soviet Union and the fall of communism in Eastern Europe. But the foreign policy, I would argue, in the 1990s was basically just getting out and disengaging the world. Now, obviously, in the Balkans, that changed. There were things that had to be taken on as Yugoslavia fell apart. But it was, once again, simply reacting to the action of the moment. You then come to 2001, and George W. Bush being elected president, and the attacks on 9/11. Once again, our foreign policy from that time has been a simple reaction to terrorism in the world. Terrorism taking on a very broad and, to that time, unexpected term. There may have been some who saw it, but by and large, it was an unexpected turn. And what we have done since that time has been mostly a reaction to that. The question we must face now in the United States is what is the next policy to take us not just through the next 2, 3, 4 years, or the next adventurism, or the next problem we face, but how is our foreign policy to be conducted for the next generations to come? And that's a question that we have not answered in the United States. It is a question that the world is begging for an answer for, and the United States, as the leader of the free world, but a partner in freedom in the world, has to start to answer for itself and for its allies in the world. This is a discussion which has not taken place yet, but has to start, and has to start soon. Because other than that, we will simply react to the problem of the moment. And that does not serve the United States well, it doesn't serve our allies well, it doesn't serve the world well, and it certainly doesn't serve freedom well. So this is a challenge we still face in the United States, and one which has to be taken on soon. And I hope the next president of the United States will take on the leadership of this and moving forward in developing a foreign policy for generations to come. Let me stop there and take questions.
Just wait, Michael. Okay, Paul, please.
I just have a couple of questions. When John Kerry was President Wang Yi, Foreign Minister of China, to cooperate with the United States and its allies to pass about a stronger and tougher UN Security Council resolution, he said, objective of sanction is not anything else but to bring the North Koreans back to the table. Sanctions in the past did not do that, and it remains to be seen what it will do to new sanctions. And of course, UN Security Council is still considering it, in my understanding, but nevertheless, China is against raising tensions in the Korean Peninsula, and that was that is the theme Kerry was responding to. Now, is this peaceful registration now went into the law? What's the purpose of this? Is it to bring the demise of a North Korean regime, or to bring them to the table of negotiations so that one might seek another chance for a peaceful resolution of the situation? That's one part of the question. And the second part of the question is, how much discretion the president will have implementing this law? Literally interpreted, you can even apply this law, what is so-called the secondary boycott, that is punishing anybody, including Chinese entities and individuals who are doing business with North Korea. We can sanction them under this law. That's the way I read it. And they will, of course, confront the China, and whether there was intent to do, and that's what the spirit of the legislation passed by Congress, wanting the president to carry that out.
The Constitution of the United States gives great leeway to the executive branch in carrying out foreign policy. And this administration, as other administrations before it, will have a great deal of leeway. Having said that, this piece of legislation, as you noted, gives them a wide range of ability to move as aggressively as they may want and feel is useful to try and achieve the goals. Let me get to the goals question in just a minute. But what we did in this legislation is to lay out and say to this administration, you have to be more aggressive. Here's your range of options. We have given you options which can make you can give you the ability to be very aggressive. But what we hope it will do, first of all, is make the administration focus on this in a way that is more intense than it was before, and more immediate than it was before, and necessary. And so that is part of it. Now, as to what the Congress hoped to mean by this, the Congress wanted to lay out, I believe, the view that North Korea is a pariah nation. And as such, they are a nation which freedom-loving countries and those people who believe in freedom should have the power and the ability to have at their command the types of, I don't know, the types of options that would allow the United States to work with a wide coalition of people to start putting pressure on North Korea. It did not say we want to get rid of the government in North Korea. It did not make that statement pure and simple. And in fact, the Congress probably isn't a very good place to make statements like that of law. 535 secretaries of state is a lousy business. So the Constitution was right in giving the executive branch primacy. But it is to say that the Congress of the United States wanted to make it very clear that this is an imminent problem that has to be dealt with starting now, and we are going to give you a wide range of dials, of variables, of options in which to deal with it. But that the Congress expected a specific result vis-a-vis the leadership in North Korea, I don't think was in the mind of Congress when they passed this, although I suspect if you ask different members of Congress, some of them would be more than willing to say they would like to see a regime change, but that would be on a personal basis. The legislation itself does not say that, although it gives a wide range of options to the United States government, the President, the Secretary of State, the executive branch, to carry out an aggressive policy towards North Korea, to stop their adventurism, and to gather the countries of the world to help stop that adventurism.
Thank you. Larry?
Mr. Hoppe, you use this term a wide range of options. I spent many years at the Congressional Research Service, and I've seen many bills passed about North Korea. And they sound very tough and demanding, but one of the things in these bills is a broad array of waiver authorities given to the president, that if he doesn't like a particular measure that is specified in a bill, he can put it aside in the interest of national security or some language like that. Now, I understand that there is a number of these waiver statements in this bill for the president. And I also understand, and this is kind of the opposite, a way to exert more pressure on the president. And I have seen this before. You have a bunch of reporting requirements, I understand, in this legislation. Could you go into the reporting requirements a little bit, and whether the waiver options for the president really are kind of standard in terms of previous bills, or whether the president is a little bit more restricted in this bill?
Let me deal with this a little more generically. As I said, this bill was passed nearly unanimously in the House, and I'm not sure, I'd have to look back at the Senate, but very few votes against it. One of the ways you end up there is because you put waivers like this in, because whoever is the party of the president in power at the time wants to make sure they give enough leeway. But if you want to show as united a front as possible, this is what happens. And part of what you're seeing here is, one can say boilerplate or legislative, I was going to use a word I won't use. Deference? That's nice. That's much nicer than the word I was going to use. To the administration, because it builds a broader strength and action that is overwhelming by a Congress which is known to be politically divided, as this one is, as many Congresses are. To be able to say that with a broad vote and huge support from both sides of the aisle, we believe in Congress has a greater effect. So, yes, we put those in, and yes, they tend to be not unlike others because, as you know, the tendency is often to refer back to other things when one is writing a piece of legislation to look at them. So they are not unlike some of the others. But the immediacy with which this took effect, the quickness with which it took effect after both the nuclear test and obviously the cyber attack earlier, but the nuclear test and the missile test, I think is testament to the concern Congress has and the desire of Congress to focus to take their focus and encourage the president to focus on this. As regards some of the regulatory stuff in here, once again, we have tried to write it in a way that will help the president use the leverage he has in ways that they feel, given this is going to be an ongoing discussion, particularly with the Chinese, but other nations of the world, the United Nations, the ability to say, I've got these guys back here who want to go a lot further than this. And I think, hopefully, there's a part of Congress, Congress, speaking of Congress and institutions is always dangerous, but there's a part of Congress which I think wants to give the president this backup, so that the president can stand and say, no, I can't go back. I can't go back beyond this. I've got to stay at least here and be moving forward because this is what my Congress says. So I think from that point of view, between the waivers and the regulations, we feel we have given the president enough room to use the strength of the resolution effectively with people who he's going to have to convince in some cases to be supportive of what we're doing. But also to say, there's a spot, I just can't back up. I am now at the wall and I can only go forward. So that's sort of the balance you get into here. I realize that's a generic answer and I don't mean to be quite so big, but I think that's really a part of what Congress was thinking of as they went forward in this.
Okay, so,
Thank you, Mr. Poppy, for a very thoughtful overview. I wanted to play off your point about Ronald Reagan moving from containment to rollback.